Good morning. Good morning. It is Shabbat Shalom. It's Friday morning, so we can say Shabbat Shalom now because we're almost there. It's Friday morning, June the 19th, and hope you're all doing well. Let me say good morning to everybody. It is, by the way, if you haven't seen, yesterday or late last night, I uploaded a new one of our new cooking videos, but this one is just featuring our daughters. So. Rivka and Cassiani, and if you haven't seen it yet, don't watch it now because we're going to do this, but then later you can go back and see it. But they're hilarious. They start off a little awkward. They didn't know what to do. They're used to, if they're on camera, they like being on camera sort of tucked behind us and with us, either my wife or I, kind of leading the charge. So this was just the two of them for the most part. And so once they got a little comfortable, it's really great. So I hope you enjoy that. And let me see here. So anyway, it is the 19th, and so today we're actually going to be looking at Psalm 49. We're just going to look at Psalm 49 today. Last month we looked at 19 and we looked at 139. And I was thinking about 49 and 79, but we're just going to do Psalm 49 this morning. But let me say good morning to everybody. And hang on one second. Sorry, I normally have this all ready to go, and it's currently not. All right, so good morning. Okay, all right, well, everybody's ready to go. Hey, good morning to, Jenny, how you doing? And Mary Lou, and Alice, and Dawn, and good morning to Lori and Pat. Good morning to my mom, I love you. And to Ellen and Richard, and Pastor and Sister Martinez, and to Ron and Amy. It's good to have you guys on here. I love going through, seeing how we're all together. Kelly Shepard and Gary, good morning. And if Gary's there, if he's not, good morning to Gary anyway, because I don't know if you're at work or not, Kelly. Good morning to the Eddies, to Lauren and David and Levi and Valor and Haven and Everett. Barbara Callahan, good morning. Hola hermana, to Sonia Valenzuela, and to Len and Joanne, good morning. All right, well, let me see, and let's see, and to Joyce, all right, Joyce and Joe, good morning. And okay, so we're going to look at Psalm 49 this morning, and it's really a psalm. Good morning, Ruti. Good morning. It's a psalm that really is to refocus our perspective. It's to make sure that our eyes are on the eternal, that we're not wrapped up in what seems important, in that what seems like power, what seems like something that we fawn over or that we worship. And so it's really dealing with riches, and rich and poor alike. And so it's a theme that you see throughout Scripture. So let's begin in Psalm 49. In Psalm 49, verse 1, it's for the music director, a psalm of the sons of Korah. It says, "Hear this, Shema, all you people." So this is to all the people of the world. "Give ear, give ear, all you inhabitants of the world." This is for everybody. He's saying, both low and high, rich and poor together. My mouth speaks wisdom. My heart's meditation is understanding. So his mouth is going to speak wisdom, that what's going to come forth from his lips, what he's going to sing here, is going to be the overflow of his heart. And what's happening in his heart is gaining understanding, getting it. There's a difference between knowledge and understanding. You can know and not get it. Like I can tell you that kind of thing. I mean, I hope that happens to me for all the days of my life, to where I thought I knew something and then I wake up and get it. If any of us think we've arrived at full understanding, it's not a good heart posture to be in, that we are in pursuit of understanding the heart of God. So I know that, over the course of, especially the last several years, there have been things that I've that I've known and that I've thought I've understood in the scripture, and then suddenly the eyes of my heart awaken, and in this moment I get it, and I'm like, how did I not get it? How have I not seen that? It's always been there. And I've even at times preached about it, and even on a surface level. And I think in one sense what also happens here is we understand as we grow, as we mature, hopefully, as we grow in the Lord, if we continue to grow and don't kind of settle into a I know it all mentality, then stage by stage the Lord will continue to peel back layers of understanding, because now you're at a place where you can get it. First you had to understand this, and so line upon line, precept upon precept, and so to understand the heart of God, to move really. So when you talk about the Torah, when you talk about instruction, when you talk about the laws of God, the commands of God, the teachings of God, one of the things that we've talked about quite a bit is this analogy of, in Galatians, the writer of Paul is the writer of Galatians. Paul talks about the Torah as a schoolmaster, and that it was given to us to help form us, to shape us, to instruct us. But you're not to remain technically in school all your life. The idea is the commands are to be birthed in your heart, that you don't just do things out of rote, but that you now, as you grow in maturity, they come from a place of understanding, of you love what the Lord loves, that you hate what the Lord hates, that your eyes are opening to see what he sees, and that's what begins to drive why you do what you do. So when we talk about giving, we say, one of the things that the Lord is doing, he's not just wanting us to give because he's in need, right? He wants us to give because we're in need. We're in need of his character, of his likeness, and he is generous, and he is overflowing. And so when we first start to walk out the acts of obedience to the Lord, at first we may be like, I don't understand, I don't get it. And even when you don't get it, you obey him, right? But then there come moments where, as you mature, you begin to understand the things your parents taught you, right? As you mature, you begin to understand what the Lord is trying to form in you. Okay, so that was a big diversion, but to say that what is about to be sung here is coming from a place of eyes wide open, getting it and seeing it. He says, my mouth speaks wisdom, my heart's meditation, what I'm pondering on in the depth of me is understanding. I will turn my ear to a proverb. I will utter my riddle on the harp. Okay, so yesterday we looked at Psalm 79. It's the same word for riddle. And what you're about to read isn't really a riddle. It doesn't feel like a riddle. Just like yesterday when he says in Psalm 79, says, I'm going to open up these perplexing sayings, or what is riddling to us. And then he begins to rehearse the history of Israel, right? Well, one of the things I talked about yesterday was my sense was it seems that this is a riddle because you guys don't seem to get it. That's what he's saying to the people. He's like, generation after generation, despite all the things that God had done, they still tried to trust in their own ways. And you would think that they would learn from the mistakes of their fathers, and yet they don't. And so that's a bit of a riddle. So what we need to do is unpack that so that we don't repeat the past, and so that this is no longer some sort of mystery. Well, what we're about to read here is not a mystery, and yet what you see is, so when it's about to talk about with riches, that we know these things about not worshiping riches. We know that people you can't take it with you, all of that, right? I mean, you know that. And yet there's something in our life and in our world and in our spheres that continue to pursue and lift up and glorify the rich, even when we know that, and yet there's something in our heart that doesn't get it. Yeah, I mean, does that make sense? That's the riddle. It's like, how do I know it but not get it? Well, I need understanding in my heart. I think about the song from Fiddler on the Roof, which is my favorite, when he's singing, "If I were a rich man," and he says, but one of my favorite lines, he goes, "When you're rich, they think you really know," and this idea that when people, if someone's rich, well, then they must have wisdom, and so we need to follow them because they've acquired wealth. And so we respect people with wealth. We respect that. And in one sense, it's worshipped. And you see that in our nation, right? Our nation, the God of this age, the gods of this age, the false gods of every age, are the pursuit of wealth and pleasure and me and exalting myself and lifting myself up and making a name for myself. And so the wisdom is to say, don't focus on that, focus on the Lord. Okay. That's a long prelude. Verse 6. So now here's the riddle that he's going to utter. Why should I fear in evil days, when the iniquity of my deceivers surrounds me? Why should I fear in evil days when the iniquity of my deceivers? It's interesting, the word deceivers there is the word Yaakov, like Jacob, because he's the supplanter, the one who's at, it can mean like footprints, or the one who's at my heel, the one who is seeking to deceive me, to supplant me. Why should I be afraid in these? He's acknowledging the days are dark, the days are evil, but I don't need to fear. Why should I be afraid when the wickedness, the iniquity of deceivers surrounds me? Or those trusting in their wealth, boasting about their great riches. And the word it uses for boasting is like hallelujah. It's hallel. Hallelujah. They're praising, they're praising the greatness of their riches, the multiplication, the multitudes of their riches. Why should I fear in these days when there are deceivers that surround me? And then there's the praise of those people praising their riches. Verse 8, no man can redeem his brother or give to God a ransom for him. For the redemption of a soul is costly, so one should stop trying forever. Now, when we read this and we see the word redeem, obviously we have a focus on Yeshua as our Redeemer. But here what you see is when it says no man can redeem his brother, what it's about to go into is no one's going to keep you from death on this world. Like, there's not enough money. There's not enough money that you have that can spare you from the way of every man. You can't buy your way out of it. So you really should stop trying. I recently, earlier this week, when I wasn't feeling well, and so I was watching some stuff, and of course I wanted to watch a feel-good thing, so of course I watched that documentary about Jeffrey Epstein. Right, what a mess. It's called Filthy Rich on Netflix, and you see this man who had who was wicked, who was preying on the weakest, preying on young girls my girl's age, and he was so wealthy. I mean, absurdly wealthy, with his own island in the Caribbean, and he had powerful friends, so that when he's sitting there before a deposition, when you read the scriptures about he who has like a who has an arrogant look in his eyes, who lifts up his head, who has pride in his heart, he has no fear because he's bought everything off. He's bought these people off. He gets a sweetheart deal. This guy gets dozens and dozens of young girls have been forever, in one sense, they had been murdered on a level. Their spirit was so harmed. Their lives were never the same. And yet he sits there and he gets this sweetheart deal. And I'm going somewhere with this, so just bear with me. Because in the real world, this is a picture of what you see, where people think that their wealth can buy off judges, that their wealth can get them what they want. He had no fear of consequences, none. And thought he had a foolproof escape plan. And, at the end of that thing, someone says they were upset because of him taking his life and said, it feels like he, again, gets away with it without accountability. But here's the deal. When we read here, the redemption of a soul is costly, so one should stop trying forever. That word used for redemption there is a word that's often used for bribes, like in Amos 5:12. It's a word. Let me look. Amos 5:12. It says, "For I know your crimes are many and your sins are countless, afflicting the righteous, taking bribes," and it's using the same word for that's used here for redemption, kofer, or and so like kippur, like an atonement, but a covering, taking bribes and turning the needy aside at the gate. And so here in Psalm 49 it says, you're not going to be able, when we stand before the judge, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't lose sight of the big picture. When it looks like the wicked are winning, when it looks like the unjust get away with everything because they don't have enough money. There's not enough money to spare themselves from the accountability that they will face. They cannot bribe the judge of all because he's a good judge and he's a righteous judge. And when you talk about judgment, everything that is good about what judging is, when you stand before a judge who will handle things fairly, and to those who look with a corrupt eye toward him, or with a haughty eye toward him, that they are brought low. But those who humble themselves before him, he is compassionate when we will humble ourselves and soften ourselves before him. All right, so Psalm 49, hang on. Verse 8, no man can redeem his brother or give to God a ransom for him. For the redemption of a soul is costly, so one should stop trying forever. Will he live forever and never see the pit? Is he never going to see the grave? Surely he must die. Even wise men die. Like the psalmist himself, who's getting understanding, says, wisdom isn't going to get you, isn't going to help you avoid the grave on this earth. So even the wise men die. The fool and the brutish will alike perish, leaving their wealth to others. Verse 12. Here's the thing. In their hearts, okay, so the psalmist here, in his heart, he's meditating to gain understanding, to gain an eternal perspective, right? But the inward thought of the way of this world is that I'm going to be independent. I'm going to rule by my own hand. I can make it happen for me. I can move things and twist things. I need no one. And so their inward thought is this. Verse 12, their houses are eternal, their dwellings for generation after generation. They name lands after themselves. But the pompous man, the man who, when it says the pompous man, it has to do with the man who is in his regalia, who is in his pomp, displaying his riches, will not endure. He is like the beasts that perish. So the idea that you name land after yourself, but the only land that you will possess will be the land that possesses you, basically, your grave. You spend your whole life gaining and acquiring and naming everything after you. But at the end of it all, you cannot escape death. Such is the way, verse 14, of the self-confident and their followers who approve their sayings. And that's a scary verse. Such is the path, such is the way of those who walk in their own confidence, who are confident in themselves, who have exalted self. Such is their path. And the followers, those who, when it says approve their sayings, it's basically saying they delight in. They're saying yes. And so in approving it, they're then little by little shaping themselves after that which they approve. You know, we change. We are constantly in process. So at the beginning when I talk about how I grow, and if I continue to grow and focus on the Lord, I can grow into understanding. But if I settle, if I think I've arrived, and then I begin to gain self-confidence and I've got this, and you let arrogance begin to creep in, arrogance changes you. It doesn't leave you the same. It's not like a backpack. It's not like a coat. It's something that will transform you, that will begin to eat you from the inside out. And so when you and I begin to, in our hearts, make compromises and give approval to that which is in opposition to God, that approval begins to change us. When we begin to follow the way, the path of the self-glorifying, when we begin to worship that, to admire that, it changes us. And so, such is the way of the self-confident and their followers who approve their sayings. And it says, Selah, you know, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Verse 15, like sheep, they are destined for Sheol. They are destined for the grave. Death will be their shepherd, and the upright will rule over them in the morning. So when it says death will be their shepherd, now what they're following, as opposed to the Lord is my shepherd, death is their shepherd, and the Lord leads me through the valley of the shadow of death, but surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days. That He sets a table before me in the presence of my enemies, right? But here it says death will be their shepherd, and it's kind of a play on words here, because shepherding has to do with leading to where they graze. It has to do with grazing. So in one sense, it's saying death will graze on them. So now they will be in the land. The land will eat them rather than them eating of the land. And the upright will rule over them in the morning. And so that in the morning is a small phrase there, that is filled with hope. Why should I fear in dark days? Why should I fear in evil days when the deceivers are surrounding, nipping at my heels? Why should I be afraid when it looks like they're getting all this wealth and everything's working for them, and what's going on? It's like, you remember in Psalm 73 where he says, boy, I almost lost my way because I looked at the way of the wicked and I thought, boy, everything's easy for them. Have I followed the Lord for no good reason? He's like, I almost stumbled, but then I entered the sanctuary of my God and I saw their end. And so that's that wisdom, that understanding. And so here he's saying he's getting it. And the upright will rule over them in the morning. There's hope. In the day to come, when we come through the darkest season, the upright will rule. And this is again an eternal perspective. It doesn't have to do with in this world, in this life, under the altar in Revelation chapter 5. It says that the saints who had died for the sake of the name were saying, when will you avenge our name? It doesn't mean we won't suffer and that we won't die and that we won't face difficulty. And this psalm gives us that hope. It doesn't say everything's going to be hunky-dory. I don't even know if anyone says hunky-dory anymore. But everything's going to be great on this earth if you just follow God. And it's saying, no, if you will endure and persevere in the morning, the upright will rule. Their image will decay in Sheol, far from its lofty place. In human history, there's a handful of people from ancient history that we still know about. There are statues that have crumbled. There are coins that people have found that with the imprint of someone's face on them from generations ago, from millennia ago. And yet, the time on this earth, the time of reveling in praising their own power, their own self-confidence, their own will, it wasn't able to buy them escape from the grave. There is no fountain of youth. There is the only hope, the only one who can redeem us from the grave is Yeshua himself. He is the only one. God himself is our Redeemer. And that's what it says here. It says, their image will decay in Sheol, far from its lofty place. So they're up high right now. Look at me, look at me. And the image that's exalted now will decay in the depths, far from where it is right now. And for eternity, when you think about that, when you think about living a life for the glory of the moment, the foolishness of that perspective versus when you breathe your last, it's over. It's over. It's over. You can't take any, and at that moment, you can't take any of that with you. And you stand before God. It says, verse 16, but God redeems my soul from the power of Sheol, for he receives me. And in the word, I don't know why they use the word receives here, because who am I? But it's a word that means grasps. He grabs me. He takes me up. He snatches me up. The Lord's going to snatch me out of the depths. Don't be afraid when a man gets rich, when his house's splendor increases. Don't be afraid. Don't tremble when all of a sudden someone who was once now poor or normal like you begins to be exalted. For when he dies, he takes nothing away. His splendor will not follow him down. Though during his life he congratulates himself, and men will praise you when you do well for yourself, it says in verse 19. He will still join his father's company, who will never see the light. A pompous man, without understanding, he is like the beasts that perish. And so this is at the end, it looks like it's the same as verse 12. If you go back to verse 12, it says here in verse 12, their inward thought, verse 13, it says, but the pompous man will not endure. He is like the beasts that perish. But at the end, it says of the same man who is clothed in his pomp, the man in his pomp without understanding is like the beasts that perish. So that's the thing. That's the riddle, is how is it that we still, knowing what we know, still pursue the riches of this world, the power of this world. We still exalt, and when they're rich, we think they really know. And we know it in our heads, and yet in our lives, we have a tendency, and in James chapter 2, or Jacob chapter 2, here I'm just going to go here. In Jacob chapter 2, we see that, I typed Jacob and it doesn't want to give that to me. In James chapter 2, verse 1, it says, my brothers and sisters, this is a temptation for people in the body of Messiah to glorify wealth. We're trained to do it. So it says, my brothers and sisters, do not hold on. My dog is growling. Hey, stop. Sorry. My brothers and sisters, don't hold the faith of our glorious Lord Yeshua, the Messiah, while showing favoritism. For if a man with a gold ring and fine clothes comes into your synagogue, and a poor person in filthy clothes also comes in, and you pay special attention to the one wearing fine clothing, and you say, sit here in a good place, and you say to the poor person, stand there, or sit by my footstool, haven't you made distinctions between yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Now, we all know, right, that that's a natural tendency. It's a natural tendency to give preferential treatment to the wealthy and to the rich. Why? Because of what they can do for me. Versus, maybe if I know them or I'm connected with them, it will benefit me. Versus the poor, well, what can they do for me? They're going to need from me. So I want to give special attention here to the one who can give to me, and maybe I'll have a minute for you later. That's the natural tendency of the me-ness. And so this riddle is we know that we're not to show distinction. We know we're to have an eternal perspective, right? But our natural inclination is to do whatever it takes to exalt me. And so it's saying don't do that here. Listen, my dear brothers and sisters, don't choose the poor. Or didn't God choose the poor in this world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom that he promised to those who love him? It says, but you have dishonored the poor person. Isn't it the rich who oppress you and drag you into court? Don't they blaspheme the good name by which you were called? If, however, you fulfill the royal law according to Scripture, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. You do well. And then in James 5, he actually then addresses the rich, because there are rich that are in the body. And he says, come now, you rich, weep and wail over the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, and your clothes have become moth-eaten. Your gold and your silver have rusted, and their rust will be evidence against you and will eat your flesh like fire. For you have stored up treasure in the last days. Behold, the wages of the workers who mowed your fields. Okay, these aren't the rich who are in the body. These are the people who have walked unjustly. The wages of the workers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts for a day of slaughter. You have condemned, you have murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you. And then we're told, be patient, brothers and sisters, until the coming of the Lord. Be patient until the morning. And so it goes, I mean, there's a ton 1 Timothy chapter 6 tells us, does address the wealth in the body. Verse 6 says, now godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into this world, verse 7, so we cannot take anything out of it. But having food and clothing, with these things we shall be content. But those who want to be rich, those who pursue riches, who pursue wealth in this world, fall into temptation and a trap and many foolish and harmful desires that plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some, longing for it, have gone from the faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. And so it has to do with what your heart is pursuing, and to be honest with yourself about what your heart is pursuing. Because we can fool ourselves, we can deceive ourselves and say, no, I'm not, it's to say, I'm going to pursue the Lord. And so it goes on, verse 17, 1 Timothy 6:17, says, direct those who are rich in this present age not to be proud, or to fix their hope on the uncertainty of riches, but rather on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. Direct them, instruct them to do good, to be rich in good deeds and mitzvot, to be generous, sharing, storing up for themselves a good foundation for the future, so they might take hold of the true life. And so as believers, we're not called to pursue riches to hoard up for ourselves, but he says to those who have been blessed in this way, make sure that you don't let it deceive you, don't let it twist you. This is a riddle that begins to twist our hearts. Set your eyes on the Lord and become like him with everything that he's given you. Yeah? So there's all of that. And let's keep our focus on the Lord. Let's say, Lord, open, when it came to the end of Psalm 49, it says, the problem with the pompous man here is his understanding or his lack thereof. What's flowing from him is not understanding. He doesn't get it. He doesn't get it, eternal perspective. And so let's make sure that we're walking in humility, that we're walking in increasing understanding to say, Lord, continue to teach me. May I walk in humility. May I hear your voice. Show me me. Show me where I am if I get off the path. Show me I don't want to follow the path of those who exalt themselves. I don't want to approve of that in my heart because that'll begin to change me. Okay. Well, let me say hello to anybody else who's joined us this morning. Did I say good? Oh, I didn't say good morning to Elizabeth. Good morning, Elizabeth, and Salome and Philip and Jesse, and good morning to Sandy. And let's see. Yes. And that's it. All right. And thank you. Someone just wished me happy Father's Day. Thank you very much. All right. Well, hey, have a great Friday. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shabbat shalom. Shalom, shalom. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow morning.